Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I was too busy reading all the comments. I wasn't Johnny on the spot when you called me. But good morning, everybody. We're so happy to see you. I'm so excited about how many people are here and looking through the little boxes at all the people that I do know and don't know. That's even more exciting to me. So um, uh, Angie and Patty and Susan asked if I would help facilitate this conversation today. So that's what I'm here for. And we are going to keep this pretty casual. You'll notice we don't have any slides for today. We're not going to go around the room and call on everybody or ask you to speak per se, but this is the second meeting we've had, I think, for program officers. And as a reminder for those of you who have been here and just an introduction for those of you who haven't, really we're looking to create this space that folks who work in this or similar roles to a program officer, because we know there are lots of different titles out there, lots of different parts of your job that may be similar or maybe different from each other. But to have this space to kind of connect with peers and learn from each other and ask questions and share stories, especially because a lot of us do work in small organizations or as the only person in an organization or the only person in your role in an organization. And having this network to lean on can be really, really helpful. So today's conversation is about basically how do we communicate with grantees and nonprofit partners. We're going to hear from three peers, three of our colleagues who are going to tell us a little bit about what they do in this vein. We'll let all three of them speak, and then we'll open it up for questions. And then we want to hear from all of you. What do you do to communicate with both your grantees or prospective grantees, and also the organizations that work in your community, especially in the type of work that you do. So that's kind of the general flow for today. Like I said, very casual. Feel free to put questions in the chat so you don't forget, and we can also just read them out later. But I think we'll go through all three speakers and then kind of ask questions after that, okay? So our first presenter is Daniel. He's with the Ann and Jean Worrell, sorry, I'm probably saying that wrong. Probably Daniel, you can fix it for me. Foundation. And go ahead and take it away, Daniel.
Yeah, well, it's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. But for any of you that I haven't met, my name is Daniel Grizzard, and I'm the Resource and Relationship Partner for the Ann and Jean Worrell Foundation. And before I get into talking about kind of what we do to meet with nonprofit organizations, I feel like I need to provide a little bit of background on the foundation. So I've been with the foundation for the Ann and Jean Worrell Foundation for about 14 months now. And I was the second employee that was hired by the foundation, with my boss, Holly Hatcher, the president and CEO of the foundation, being hired in February of 2023. So the foundation's been around since the 80s, and it was just the private philanthropy for Ann and Jean Worrell. But now that they've passed away, the foundation has added staff, and along with adding staff, it was really changing the grant making that was happening, both in terms of the scale was increasing a lot, the geographic area was changing, and the program areas that the foundation was doing grant making in were expanding. And so it was just a lot of change happening at the same time. And so the first probably 8 months of my job was really just helping with the strategic planning process, figuring out what the new priorities were going to be, the geographic areas we were going to be working on, and just what grant making was going to look like moving forward. And during that time, the foundation had paused grant making for all organizations that had previously received funding, and for any new inquiries that we were receiving. And so when we were completing our strategic plan and coming out of this grant making pause, we were also shifting from a pretty high barrier invitation only foundation to a foundation with a much more open grant making process. And just all of that change and all of that newness led to a lot of demand from existing grantee partners and then also new organizations that had heard about us to learn more about what the foundation was doing, where we were doing it, and how they could apply for funding and potentially receive a grant. And so we, during the grant making pause, had built up an email list of about 150 organizations that were waiting to hear from us once this pause was completed. So the first thing that we did coming out of the pause was we just had two webinar sessions where Holly and I had slides that were basically talking about the strategic planning process we had done, and then also going through all of our new grant making priorities, the program areas and the geographic areas. And then we had a few slides about what the application process was going to be like. But we really wanted to kind of announce ourselves and introduce ourselves to all of the new organizations that we were going to be working with. So the meeting process I'm going to be describing today is definitely more labor intensive than I think makes sense for certain organizations. But for us, expanding in the way that we were, wanting to be a good partner to all of the nonprofit organizations in the regions we were going to be working in, and also needing to learn a lot about the organizations that were going to be our partners moving forward, we felt like we really wanted to be meeting with every single organization that was interested in applying for funding from the foundation. And so what we did is we set up a process where any organization that was interested in funding would send us a 1 to 5 sentence email just describing, the name of the nonprofit, their tax status, and then a little bit about the work that they did and where they did it. And essentially anybody that was working in the geographic areas that we were working in and was doing work that was not explicitly blocked or like something that the foundation wouldn't fund based on our new strategic plan, we scheduled a meeting with. And so I'm sure, a ton of you are familiar with Calendly and what an incredible tool it can be for scheduling meetings. But for anybody who isn't, I'm basically a walking Calendly ad at this point because it would have been impossible to do the work that we've done over the past few months without it. It's a meeting scheduling tool. And so what you can do is you can set up a page where you block off all time that you're available during any time period you want. You can do it a week at a time, a month at a time, 3 months at a time. So you can set up what hours you're available for meetings. And then anybody who has the link to that Calendly page can go in and schedule a meeting. You can customize how long the meetings are for. You can customize how many can be scheduled per day. You can customize the amount of time buffer that there is between scheduled meetings. And you can also set it up so that it sends a Zoom link automatically to the person that has scheduled the meeting, and it sends a Zoom link and calendar notification to the person the meeting's being scheduled with. So what I did was I basically set up about 5 hours of every single workday for the next 3 months that were available for Calendly meetings. And I had it set up so the meetings had to be scheduled at least 24 hours in advance. The meetings were each going to be for 45 minutes. And up to 4 meetings could be scheduled in each day. So I basically knew that at least 4 hours of every single day were going to be potentially me having meetings with nonprofit organizations, but I still had some advance notice, of who I was going to be meeting with, which allowed me to, review tax forms, social media, websites, and just have a general idea of what that nonprofit did before we met with them. And so then what we did during these meetings is, spend the first few minutes just kind of talking to each other on a personal level, getting to know the director or the director of advancement or whoever it was that I was meeting with at the nonprofit. And then we'd get into first, I would just invite them to talk some about the work that they did and the needs that their organization had. And then based off of the work they did and the sort of funding requests that they were interested in submitting, I would then share my screen and go through our entire application process, showing them what the form looked like and could customize kind of and cater to the relevant things that they would need to bring up at different stages of the application, key things to kind of go into more detail on, things to mention in the narrative section, information to include in the budget section, and just basically walk through the entire application with every single person interested in applying. And we'd also provide guidance, kind of talking about the precedent that would be setting in terms of what the foundation funded, how well that fit with the foundation's grant making priorities. And so we were very transparent with them at this stage of the process to really let them know kind of where, it seemed like that application would be heading with the foundation. And so over 3 months, I personally had about, I think it was 121 of these meetings, and the foundation had 158 of them overall, which ended up resulting in 123 applications that we received this year. And we were able to have, a really strong, enhanced kind of grant making program this year as we were expanding into this much larger geographic region, both in Charlottesville, where we're located, but also in Southwest Virginia, that just wouldn't have been possible to, have learned about all these different organizations and kind of conducted the proper due diligence on them without the process starting with these meetings where we were able to really develop a relationship with the organizations that we, we're going to be working with through the rest of the application process, and for a lot of them now as grantee partners. And so it was a really labor-intensive process, but something that was really helpful for us in learning about organizations and getting ahead of, questions and things that would have come up later on during the review process. And we've also received a lot of feedback from nonprofit organizations, both that received and that did not receive funding, just appreciating the transparency that the process allowed for and the personal touch and the time and respect that, we offered to the organizations by making sure that they had this one-on-one time and really understood exactly where they stood throughout the entire review process. And so, oh, Kelly, that's a great question. Yeah, and something I glossed over. So when they would email us, the like 1 to 5 sentence summary, kind of, just asking, if they were eligible to apply, I would email back if they were working within our geographic area, and invite them to schedule a meeting, and I would send them the Calendly link in that response email. And so that's a general overview of the process that we've used this year. Um, and yeah, I think, are going to be moving to a slightly higher barrier version of this moving forward, just because now we do kind of have a general overview of the landscape in this expanded grant making format, but was something that was really helpful as we were, expanding our grant making. We're able to learn so much and develop relationships with so many nonprofit organizations. Average size of grant award, I'm not sure exactly. I'm still doing we just finished our grant making for the year, so I'm still running some of those numbers, but they range from about 10,000 to $300,000. And grants awarded, I think, is around the range of 60. And yeah, so that's just the general overview of our process. And do we want to do questions now or move on to the next person and then answer questions at the end?
I think we can move on. We'll hold grant questions till after you've answered a bunch of the specific questions, I think. And I was going to ask the same thing about how many you did, how many grants you awarded out of those 123 apps. So, but I think, yeah, you answered the main ones here, and we'll hold others till after our three speakers. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. That is, wow, 100, did you say 135 meetings? That's a lot.
I think, yeah, it was 158 in total.
Oh, yeah, right. For you and then yeah, wow, that's a lot of meetings. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Kelly is going to share with us a little bit about what they do at Dominion Energy.
Thanks, Rachel. So Kelly Thompson, Executive Director of Dominion Energy's Charitable Foundation. So we are a corporate foundation, obviously, and work not only across Virginia, but also South Carolina, parts of North Carolina, Connecticut, West Virginia, and until very recently, also Ohio and Utah. So we have a big footprint and a pretty small team. And so we started a new thing this year that is sort of the opposite of what Daniel did. We had a number of changes this year that we wanted to be able to communicate out to people and share those details and have some more engaging conversations rather than just posting information on our website. We did move to grant cycles. In the past, we'd done grants on a rolling basis throughout the year. And so we have adopted grant cycles now. So we have 2 annual cycles each year in the spring and the fall. We also switched platforms. We moved from Cyber Grants to Benevity. And so we wanted to be able to share with kind of new potential grantees as well as longstanding grantees information about both of those changes. So we decided to host virtual office hours. So for ahead of the spring cycle, and we did this for the first one, we said, there's a lot of big changes at the first of the year. We'll host these virtual office hours to let people know, answer questions. So with our spring cycle at the beginning of 2024, we scheduled, I think, 6 virtual office hour sessions. And so kind of ahead of and throughout that open application period. And they were really successful. And so we did it again in the fall. And I think we intend to keep doing this. And so we had 6 sessions in the beginning. Ahead of these changes in the office hours, we sent an email out to anybody who'd gotten a grant award from Dominion Energy over the past 3 years, letting them know about the changes and also that we'd be hosting office hours if anybody was interested. On our website, we put the link to sign up for those, and we did it through WebEx. But on each of those that we've done, so we did probably 6 sessions in the spring and another kind of 5 or 6 sessions in the fall. On each of those calls, we had probably 20 to 70 people sign up for each call. Obviously different rates for different calls, but all had a really good number of people. We got great questions. We did invite all of our team members. Most of them showed up for again, small team. I'm talking 5 people. But so unless somebody had conflicts, everybody participated. It gave people a chance to kind of do names and faces, and also our team could benefit from hearing the questions that came up, and identifying organizations that are in their areas. And so they've been great. I shared one of my favorite things from the call, which was sort of an unintended bonus, was seeing kind of as people asked questions or identified themselves in the chat, other groups that were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were out there. Let's connect. And so there was, some side benefits as well. But we were able to give really high level information about the changes that we'd made, but just generally about the grant making philosophy, average size grants, all of those things. I could share my screen and walk through what the application looked like, and some of those common questions that we got are things that some people might find tricky. And so we were able to do that. The calls lasted usually about 45 minutes with the presentation, and then time for questions at the end. People could ask questions in the chat or come off mute and ask their questions. And then if anybody had super specific to their organization questions, sometimes they'd ask them, and sometimes, but we'd also offer the email address in case anybody wanted to, if they had very specific questions to their organization. So that's worked really well for us. It's been a great process. And then we still obviously have lots of one-on-one meetings as well. There's not a kind of method to the badness, or it's not as systematic as Daniel's system, but we certainly all of the members of our team are taking individual meetings as well. But as much as we can, kind of people who have those sort of general questions, pointing them to the office hours has been really successful.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I did want to ask you one quick question, and I think you said this, but the virtual office hours that you had were prior to application, right? That's when you put out you were changing things, or prior to the RFP, it was not post application?
Correct. So we had the application period open for 6 weeks. So kind of, I think the first cycle was the beginning of February through the middle of March. And so we started hosting sessions probably a week before the grant cycle opened and before the application portal opened. And then we had them about once a week. So just starting ahead of it and then through the session, wanted to make sure that we went into it, because you'll be shocked to hear that everybody waits until like the last day to submit their applications. Yeah, and so we wanted to make sure we were having those conversations kind of up until the deadline almost as well, so that for people who were kind of just getting into it would have that opportunity also.
That's great. Thank you so much. Just a reminder to everyone, go ahead and put questions in the chat if you have them as we go, and we'll try to make sure to get them answered for you. And of course, like I said, we'll open it up also just to ask your questions verbally. But so we've heard from kind of some one-on-one meetings, some with applicants or potential applicants, group meetings with potential applicants. Now, Brandy is going to talk to us a little bit about what Act for Alexandria does to connect with their nonprofits.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandy. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Act for Alexandria. We are the community foundation for Alexandria. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary in November. I've been with the organization for 18 of those 20 years. Kelly's actually a board member at ACT, so it's fun to be part of this community, and Rachel and I are grabbing lunch after this meeting, so love this little Northern Virginia community that we have up here. Hope you all have a chance to connect with your fellow program officers in your regions too. I would say it's really exciting to be part of this program officers group. I will say it was really kind of lonely and isolating to be the sole person at our foundation in this role for the first 14 years. I was on staff. I will say now we have 2.5 people in the program department. One person is split half-time program, half-time operations. So I'll also give a little bit of background on our foundation, because I know each of the foundations that have talked are very different from each other. So when our foundation was first established, we really wanted to prioritize building relationships and trust with the community, especially the nonprofit sector. When we started, many of the nonprofits saw us as a competitor and felt like we were going to take away resources from the community. So we really wanted the sector to view us as a partner and really work to be thoughtful about how we would approach our work in this way. We have always funded capacity building grants since we started our grant making. We don't have an endowment, so we knew that we were not going to have a lot of the big dollars to do general operating or program support, but we knew that investing in capacity building had the potential to strengthen and transform an organization and really end up ultimately transforming the sector in Alexandria. So our engagement with the nonprofit community has evolved over the years. Again, really always trying to, in our work, leverage our role as a convener and a partner. So I would say early on, we hosted conversations with nonprofits. We also did a similar conversation with city government leaders and really just asked the question, like, what keeps you up at night? It was really helpful to hear, like, what's going on? What are the things that you're thinking about? What should be on our radar as the community foundation? We're a small enough community that we know most of the nonprofit leaders, but I think what we're all experiencing is that there has been a lot of turnover. So it's having to re-get to know new staff at organizations. But because of our small grant making budget, we were only funding maybe just a handful of these organizations. So really didn't know all the groups in a way that was more in-depth that we wanted to. I would say one thing that changed in our ability to form those relationships was when we started our online giving day. So we host a giving day called Spring to Action. We're going to be in our 15th year next year, and that really changed the relationship that we had with nonprofits and actually helped them to see us as the foundation in a new way. We really became their champion and really helped to support and build their fundraising capacity. We were also able to bring alongside dollars, whether it was for prizes or even for donor advised funds to be engaged with the work that they were doing. Nonprofits that are in this space, and really provided an opportunity for more relationship building and for us to learn more about each other, especially when the training was done in person before COVID, where everybody would would come to our offices for different types of trainings. I would say fast forward in 2019, we joined the trust-based philanthropy movement and really wanted to be mindful of our power as a foundation and the dynamic that often exists between a funder and a nonprofit. So through this work, we have seen that our philanthropy is more strategic, rewarding, and impactful when we approach these relationships with our partners from a place of trust and collaboration. Rather than, I think, in the past, there's been a lot of compliance and control in funder and nonprofit relationships. In 2020, right before COVID, we actually partnered on what I would say was our first kind of official office hours event with the Meyer Foundation. So I think probably 15 people attended, and it was an opportunity to introduce their director of Virginia Partnerships and Strategy to the Alexandria community and to help her get to know our nonprofits. We really think of like, what are some ways that we can use our power and relationships to support the nonprofits and their visibility? Again, knowing that we don't have a lot of dollars to spread around, but we do have our voices that we can help amplify the work of others. I'm sure many of you saw this too during COVID. There was a lot of turnover in the sector, lots of new staff people joining organizations, and actually we finally had a program team. So I had new members that I wanted them to meet the nonprofits. And so it wasn't just my face that they were meeting, but other people on our team. And so we really wanted to find ways to connect with these nonprofits, again, building trust, fostering connections, and really hearing what's on the minds of these nonprofit leaders. So that led us to be doing more office hours. Anytime we have a grant program, we offer office hours. We don't have a Calendly. I feel like our calendars are so crazy, it's hard for us to manage that. But we do have an email that people can send, and then somebody from our team will schedule something. And then we had a lot of one-on-one with just leaders, nonprofit leaders. And I would say those conversations really help to inform our grant making. So in 2022, we as a team decided to get out from behind our computers. It was finally safe to like be out in the world again, get into the community. And we hosted, which is funny because this is what this is called, something called Coffee and Conversations. And we decided to go to different locations across the city. So, we went to a local coffee shop on the west end of Alexandria, invited people to come meet us just to have a conversation, get to know us. We went to a bakery in Arlandria, which is on a whole other side of the city. And we actually did something where we said, we're reading this article. We would love for you to join us in having a conversation about what we're reading and hear what your reactions are to it too. It was a chance again to get out of our space into the spaces where nonprofits were in their local communities. And also it's a chance to support local businesses and to highlight them too, because we were talking about the work that we were doing and telling people to go to these places. So again, it really was just inviting people to come meet the team, sharing what's on their mind, and talking about ways that ACT might be able to partner with them. Again, we don't have a lot of discretionary dollars, but we also work with donor advised fund holders. So while they are responsible for directing their dollars, they often come to us and ask like, well, do you know about a group that's doing this? Or tell us about what's going on in this space. And so having those one-on-one conversations really helps us do our jobs better by serving our donor advised fund holders as well. Again, 2022, we ended up investing about $150,000 in mental health and wellness grants to support nonprofit leaders. And this decision was made after we had many conversations with the leaders about what they were experiencing. Again, there was burnout, there was trauma, secondary trauma, just new people joining the team, people being remote for so long. It was a chance for them all to come together and use grant funds based on what was most appropriate for their organization. This year, we actually tweaked our Coffee and Conversations concept because we kept hearing from nonprofits that they wanted more opportunities to come together as a whole and to share and learn from one another. So earlier this spring, we hosted a session on fundraising. I know many of you are experiencing the COVID cliff, or your nonprofits are. we're in a national election year. Locally, we're in an election year for our leaders. There's just a lot of uncertainty. And so we invited them to just come and let's have a conversation. So I think like 40 different leaders showed up. Our Chief Development Officer shared a little bit about kind of fundraising from our perspective, some of the tools that we use, and really it was more just facilitating a conversation among the attendees. It was a chance for us to look at how we can help strengthen the development officer network as well. I think sometimes people in development can feel very lonely too in the work. And actually, about a week and a half ago, we hosted another Coffee and Conversations around organizational resilience. And this is the whole idea of like, how can we actually support the people who are caring for the community? And so we had a panel discussion about how are you building resilience into your organization, whether it's through coaching, through assessment tools, through sabbaticals, through succession planning, really giving people a chance to hear from some leaders and then have some dialogue among the audience. This also launched our grant program, the one that we have going on right now, that's really focused on supporting leaders to build organizational resilience so they can guide their teams through these challenges, adapt to changes, and kind of help them see different possibilities in times of adversity. So I will say with every grant, we host an information session. When the grant cycle opens, we put a recording on the site of that, on our website of that session. And again, we offer that email, grants@actforalexandria.org, for people to sign up to have conversations with us. We used to do open office hours, but we felt like a lot of times it was just us kind of sitting on a Zoom, waiting for someone to show up. So we wanted to try to make it more accessible for when organizations had space in their calendars to talk. And a lot of times, like Kelly was saying, it was at the last minute. So again, we know that nonprofits need dollars. We're always trying to think beyond the dollars about what else we can provide and how we're using our power to amplify their work and introduce like the Alexandria nonprofits to other foundations and donors. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you so much. I want to thank all three of our volunteers who have shared with us a bit about their work. Like I said before, I kind of love that it hits connecting and communicating with not just grantees, but also your partners, the organization in your geography and your focus area in different ways. So again, like I said before, with kind of more of an individual one-on-one call with the group calls, and then with these sessions that ACT has that are not specific necessarily to a grant, but more of a way to kind of keep that ongoing learning together and relationship. So thank you again, Daniel, Kelly, and Brandy. Amazing work. Daniel, I will share, we just put out a new RFP, and it's the first time we've had an open RFP in a while, y'all. So I'm a little nervous about how many proposals we're going to get. And I've learned from my friend Lauren here from Delta Dental about having calls with applicants after they've applied. But I cannot, and so that's already scaring me with how many that might be. But Daniel, I can't imagine having 150 one-on-one calls. So kudos to you and all of you for that great work. So I see a question here for Daniel. Does Calendly integrate with other calendars, like for example, Outlook, so that you can accept other meetings without double booking?
You know, Adam, I hate to say my answer is I'm not sure, because one of the additional staff members that the Energy and World Foundation has added is an office manager. Okay, that's great. Yes, it does. I was going to say there was actually somebody else on the team that was handling that, but that's great to know that it does.
Thank you. And Kelly, question for you from Kelly. Curious why you went from rolling grant deadlines to grant cycles.
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One, I should probably work on my talking points before I say this. I mean, it allowed us to be more strategic, right? I mean, if you have rolling grants coming in all of the time, and you have a limited budget. And we knew some, you know, we were having those one-on-one conversations. We had kind of repeat grantees every year. So we knew some of what to expect. But if somebody came in at the end of the year with like a really outstanding application and we didn't have the budget left and it's something that we really would have loved to have support, it makes it hard, right? And so having those grant cycles gives you a better idea of let's get everything in and then be able to evaluate those and see where we can give. Are we, you know, we've got 4 focus areas, which are very broad. And so you can fit a lot in there, but right. And, you know, are we giving all of our money to environmental projects before the education projects come in or the community needs projects? And so really allowed us to kind of take that bigger look at it. It also gives, from the nonprofit side, a more defined timeline and helps them plan better too, right? And so there might be some times where a lot of those applications we would turn over pretty quickly, but some of them we would get and we'd say, well, let's hold this. We almost were like making grant cycles unofficially by saying, we'll hold on to this for a little bit and we'll see kind of how things play out with the budget if we've got money to support it at the end of the year. And then that wasn't really fair to nonprofits when we were like, yeah, we've got it. We're really interested, but, you know, hold for a few months and let us figure out if we're going to be able to support it this year. So it made sense on our end, but then I think also from the nonprofit side, it gave organizations really sort of a more reliable time frame of when they could expect to hear from us. And the first cycle kind of getting into it was hard because we had to say, okay, who are the things that we're expecting will come in that their timing might not align? So that very first cycle was hard as we sort of got people into the right cycle, right? If they had a project that that was happening in March and we were going to still be in the middle of our grant cycle, how could we kind of reconcile that? We did a few of those kind of we started this in 2024. At the end of 2023, we said, what do we know that's coming up and how can we kind of get ahead of that, or call people and say, hey, apply for the spring, you know. So we had to do some of that, but that's the reason why we switched, or the primary reasons. And I do think it's a best practice also. I mean, I think with sort of large grant making organizations, it's not an anomaly to do that. So.
Thank you. Other questions, feel free to put in the chat, do the little raise hand thingy or come off mute and shout it out. We are, like I said, we are conversation being informal. Okay, I'm going to go ahead then while we're waiting for other folks to come up with their questions and ask, I don't know if Jessica was able to come back, but Jessica and Andrea, you mentioned you both have Calendly links kind of generally open in like, is that all year round at all times just for any general inquiries, or how do you kind of manage that aspect?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. We have them on our website anywhere, like on any page about our grants or any kind of requests for funding. We've got do you have questions? Sign up on Calendly. And we move towards it really to save some of those back and forth emails, trying to find a time that works for everybody. Because as has already been noted, there's a lot of waiting until right before a deadline for folks to start reaching out. And I found like the time to even schedule those just wasn't there. I also have a link in my email signature that folks will use sometime. And it's been working pretty well. It definitely saves us a lot of back and forth. We are open to kind of any individual questions before our what we call concept paper due dates, but it's basically a letter of intent. And people definitely take advantage of those. We recommend them, especially for new organizations that are just getting to know us, so that we can give them some kind of one-on-one guidance. And it's like we've all said, it's a great opportunity to get to know them. But then we also do kind of formal scheduled calls post application with everyone that has applied for funding. And I think our approach to that lines up pretty closely with how Delta Dental does it. So there's a couple different opportunities to talk about things, but Calendly has been really helpful for those like introductory conversations, or like what we like to call like when they want to throw spaghetti at a wall, see what
Yeah.
sticks. Really hard to do that in an email.
Yes, and hard to do that once you're already in the application process, right?
Yeah.
Because there's feedback that folks want as they think about, what they want to apply for, or what they want to say in their application. So I'm curious too, for anyone who does those kinds of meetings like you all, and Meg, you said that you meet with all of your partners before a new cycle. I think you mean grantees, but feel free to clarify. I'm curious for folks, for you, Meg, and for others who do similar connecting, is that do you have site visits with your grantees already? And this is in addition to that, but specific to a new grant cycle, or is this kind of all rolled into one?
It's sort of a both and. I do site visits, so I have site visited all of our partners. We call our grantees our partners. But prior to a grant cycle, if they want to put in a proposal, then we meet virtually. If I haven't had a site visit with them, I will do that, but I will still have the virtual meeting. And I try to, during that, be really transparent, talk to them about what are you thinking? Does it make sense or not? Are you really ready to apply? Are there other people maybe you should connect with and provide a joint grant proposal together? So we really just kind of talk it through. It is super time consuming, but I just think it's incredibly worthwhile and really supports our relationships with our partners.
That's great. Anyone else want to talk about how, if they kind of combine with site visits, or if it's a separate conversation?
Well, we got Northern Piedmont Community Foundation. We do site visits with all of our folks who are getting grant funding from us. Then also in our application page, we also have a item that says, "Hey, have you talked with anyone on staff with MPCF about your project?" So it's a great way for us to kind of, again, as they were saying, kind of touch base with them. Here's what you're thinking. Here's maybe how grants have been successful last year. And then it's also time for us to kind of touch base as well with their follow-up reports. Because then for me, I can read their follow-up report and say, okay, great, you're looking to apply for this grant. We see you got it in 2023. Let's chat a little bit about that, and then also chat about the new grant that they'd be applying for.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was curious, because at least for, presumably if you have a grant cycle, at the time that you're applying for your next grant is probably sort of towards the end of your previous grant, in which case the site visits and the pre-proposal conversations might be around the same time, calendar wise. So that's why I was curious about that. Adam, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna try join the conversation with Andrea and Daniel and just put a plug in. I started using Calendly, but then switched over to Bookings, which is part of Office 365, which is what our organization supports. And I one of my questions for them was, in terms of setting it up, I was conflicted with, how constrictive am I in terms of, is it a 30-minute meeting or a 40-minute meeting? Because, I ended up setting them at 30 minutes, and then I'd end up on calls with people, and then they'd feel pressured to wrap up because their time was almost over. So I was constantly reassuring folks, oh, don't worry about it. We have time. We can continue this discussion. So I was curious about kind of those time constraints that you guys set and your experience with that. But also, I wanted to put a plug out. I think you can do this in Calendly as well, but in Bookings, I have 3 meeting options, Zoom, phone call, or in person. So people can, choose what they're most comfortable with and set it on their own schedule.
Thank you.
I can at least like for the Energy Memorial Foundation answer Adam and say that we started with them listed as 30 minutes and then realized about 5 meetings in that every meeting was starting with me saying, but it's okay if it goes over. And so then I just shifted it to say 45 minutes so that all of the organizations we were speaking with were also allocating at least 45 minutes on their side because, you know, some did end before that time, but it just felt like you said rushed and like there was pressure to make sure that, you know, everything had been said when we were trying to limit it to 30 minutes.
We do limit ours to 30 minutes because there's not enough time in the day to go much beyond that, especially because the bookings that come in through Calendly tend to be concentrated in like the 2 weeks before our concept paper deadlines, which is also not a particularly quiet time for us. So we've had to be pretty intentional about setting aside the time that's available and then really protecting it. So I'll kind of start the call with that, like a note, you know, this really is just 30 minutes. That's what we have. Let's be really focused on, you know, the most important pieces. And then we can always follow up via email or set up another follow-up call if that would really be helpful. But it's hard to keep it in the half an hour range.
Thank you. Brandy, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo from a couple of comments ago that we do site visits with not every single grantee. It depends on if it's a renewal applicant or a new project or a new applicant. If it's a renewal, we'll just do program officer meetings with them, but we do offer site visits for new projects and new applicants. I also wanted to just highlight that we also do proactive grant making. So in addition to our 2 grant cycles per year, we do larger collaborative, proactive efforts. And on those are a lot more, the conversation on those is a lot more frequent, depending on the type of initiative that it is. For example, our Partners for Neighborhood Renewal Initiative has been going on for years, bi-monthly check-in meetings. And then for some that are projects that are outside of our grant cycle, but very timely and collaborative, we'll do regular check-ins with them until that proactive grant proposal is approved, and then occasionally check in with them after, depending on what our role is in that initiative.
Brandy. Okay, we have a couple folks who can't raise their hands. So Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we do a combination of a lot of the things here at the Community Foundation for Loudoun and Northern Fauquier. We all have Calendlys. We tend to use them when somebody reaches out and says that they'd like to chat with us, or you know, if a question can't be answered via email, then we share our calendar and say, please feel free to make a reservation on our calendar. Reservation is not the right word. A calendar spot. And that helps because we have this policy of meeting with all of the local nonprofits, anyone who wants to meet with us, and beyond, to answer any questions that they have about the Community Foundation, but also to be a connector to resources in the community. So we don't just stop with our conversations. We want to learn about them for our, our fund holders, because they might be asking what great projects are happening in our community. So we feel that it's our job to learn what's going on in the local nonprofits, but also to be connectors to the other nonprofits that they might need to be partnering with, or that they might need to be aware of. We get a lot of organizations that are moving into Loudoun, and they haven't really done any research at all as to what the landscape is, who is already doing work in this space, who should they be partnering with, so that they can integrate into this space properly. So we found that the calendar invites are really helpful for that. We do the same where we offer, the Zoom, the in-person. The one thing that I have to be super careful of is the way that Calendly responds back is making sure that I see whether they've chosen in-person or Zoom, because that can be really tricky, because I've given myself like a 15-minute buffer between and if I have another meeting and I'm not around, like that can be tricky because I may not be able to. So I've had to be really careful about blocking more things off on my calendar so that when somebody engages with the Calendly, I don't have to then reschedule them. And related to the grant making, we obviously, our fund holders can make grants and grant recommendations anytime they want to go out to the nonprofit community. But for the grant application cycles at the Community Foundation for Loudoun and Northern Fauquier, we offer a pre-grant workshop for every single one of our grants, grant application processes before they open. So, or excuse me, right after they open. So right after they open, we kind of give like a week or two for people to get in there, play around in the application, and then we offer the pre-application workshop. And what we have found is that, you know, we get, for the most part, better applications from the people that have come to the workshop. But there are, and then we make that recording available to anybody that wasn't able to make it to the workshop. And, you know, reading, you know, 79 grant applications that came in and seeing things that could have been made stronger in their applications had they watched the application workshop, or the blatant, like it was clear that they weren't at the workshop based on how questions are being answered. Or, you know, I think that you want people to be successful. But again, you know, it's all of these grants tend to be very competitive. So you want to do what you can. And then the last thing, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do this as well, is for every grant application cycle that we have at the Community Foundation for Loudoun and Northern Fauquier, we always offer grant feedback sessions afterwards. And that's that my calendar link goes out for that. So they don't even have to ask, they just go right to the calendar. So during that time, I really have to be very aware of blocking time on my calendar so that the calendar doesn't accidentally get, the Calendly doesn't override something. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. But the grant feedback sessions have probably been one of the things that we hear the most positive feedback on, is being able to get feedback. Thanks for noticing.
Great, thank you. I want to be respectful of time, but hopefully we can get in these last couple of questions. So Sari, go ahead with your question or comment.
Oh, just a quick comment. We do very similar things to everyone: feedback calls, pre-calls. Well, we've decided, because of the challenge that you're describing, Joanne, we went ahead and work with Sign Up Genius. And so we block off times in our calendar, and we just send out the Sign Up Genius. It has the same Zoom link, and we just kind of send it out. And then we know that there's a period of time in which we're committed to either pre-calls, feedback calls. And it's just worked out better for us because of that whole overriding feature and fear that, like, I'm going to have a meeting scheduled when someone else has scheduled something with me. So that's something we've just done. Also quickly around capacity building, we just co-hosted something with the Community Foundation for Loudoun, Northern Fauquier counties, which was great, around fundraising. And we're doing two other sessions, but we're moving potentially, as I said, probably into doing something similar to what Brandy's doing around offering the nonprofits some small grants. So we're in the same space as all of you. I think it's all about building trust and relationships with these organizations, letting them know that we're here, and being really transparent with them about what we have available and how we want to partner with them.
Thank you. And Alexis, last question or comment.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, just a quick comment. We do, like I said, we do very similar things. I put some things in the chat, but I wanted to add that we do a community partner celebration once a year for our 2-cycle grant cycles. So we invite all those awarded partners to a big dinner. We usually host it at one of the colleges as another way to partner. But there they get to meet hospital leadership. They get to meet their regional representatives. So with Sentara, there is a regional representative in each region of our hospital that does kind of that connection between our physical hospitals and then our corporate CEI, who does a lot of the grant making. So that's just one thing we added to kind of give a more personal touch, as well as fostering those partnerships with our nonprofit organizations.
Thank you, Alexis. That's great. I've seen a lot of folks here, I think, on the call, and other local foundations who do a similar celebration luncheon or something after awarding grants, but that added kind of bringing in some other folks that they get to connect with. That's really that's a neat addition there. Well, it's 11:28, and I think we only have 2 more minutes of your time. Before I pass it over to Susan, I just want to say thank you again. This was a really fabulous conversation. I love that everyone's doing some similar things, some different things. Of course, it all depends on your individual organization, your capacity and size. But I think to me, this is just a great way to kind of get some ideas and talk through things. So thank you all for your time. And thank you again to Brandy and Kelly and Daniel for sharing with us what you do. And I am going to turn it over to Susan. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rachel. And thanks so much, everybody, for being with us today. Just very, very, very quickly, if you have ideas for the next session, please reach out to us. Please reach out to me or Rachel or Patty or Angie. I will also send something out via listserv. Encourage you to reach out if you have topics. I feel like this conversation was so rich. So if we'd like to continue this conversation, that is certainly something we can do. Capacity building has been a big topic in the chat as well. So that could be a potential for the next session. So we so appreciate your engagement and interest in the work. And we hope everybody has a great day. We look forward to the next one.